wail of a fire truck pierced the quiet night of Cortland, Mississippi. A car was burning fiercely on the side of a deserted road, its red flames illuminating the pitch-black sky. And then, from the sea of fire, a young woman staggered out, her body almost completely burned. It was a terrifying moment that no one at the scene that day would ever forget. That girl was Jessica Chambers, 19 years old, a beautiful, vivacious young woman who was loved by many in the small community where she was born and raised. It should have been just another ordinary day for Jessica, but no one expected it to be the last day of her life. Cortland, a peaceful town with red dirt roads and simple wooden houses, where crime seemed a distant thing. But on that fateful evening in December 2014, darkness truly engulfed everything. People were terrified, police were baffled, and unprecedented and barbaric crime haunted not only the local community, but also the United States. Who could do such a cruel thing? And why? Jessica Chambers' heartbreaking story begins in that fiery moment. December 6, 2014, began like any other winter day in Cortland, Mississippi. Jessica Chambers, a 19-year-old blonde with a kind smile, left her home early in the afternoon, not knowing that it would be her last public appearance. The last image of Jessica was captured on a gas station camera. She was wearing a light yellow shirt and sweatpants, filling up her car and driving away. There was no sign of anything out of the ordinary, no sign of worry or fear. But just a few hours later, things took an unexpected turn. Jessica's phone showed that she was in constant contact with Quentin Tellis, 26, an acquaintance who had met her privately a few weeks earlier. Phone records and GPS location data confirmed that they had been together in the hours leading up to the tragedy. What exactly happened between them is unclear. Jessica would never get a chance to tell. Around 7 p.m., residents discovered a raging fire along a deserted road. When rescuers arrived, they found Jessica, still alive, stumbling away from the burning car, her body nearly burned to the ground. Though her breathing was weak and her voice was ragged, Jessica seemed to be trying to say the attacker's name, but the sound was too faint for anyone to hear clearly. Jessica was rushed to the emergency room in critical condition. What remained was the charred car in a brutal scene. No sign of a struggle, no blood, just ashes and unanswered questions. The police knew that clues lay somewhere in Jessica's final hours. Suspicion quickly fell on Quentin Tellis, but like a wisp of smoke, the truth slipped out of reach, leaving the town in shock and doubt. As the Mississippi sky turned a dark purple on a winter night, the peacefulness of Cortland was shattered by the flames that were blazing down the deserted rural road 747. Several locals on their way home noticed an unusual light in the distance, a light that did not belong to any ordinary house or vehicle. It was a fire, rising like a solitary pillar of fire in the darkness. Within minutes, a panicked 911 call was placed. The operator's shaky voice on the other end of the line told them immediately that this was no ordinary fire. As fire trucks and police rushed to the scene, they could not have predicted what they were about to see. The car, later identified as Jessica Chambers, was reduced to a mangled mass of metal, still smoldering. But what made everyone freeze was not the car, but a horrifying image, a young woman covered in horrific burns, staggering through the darkness. Jessica, in an unimaginable state, was still alive. Although her body was almost completely destroyed by the fire, she still tried to stand, tried to speak, albeit in broken, incoherent sounds. One of the firefighters ran over, knelt beside her, and asked in a panic, "Who did this to you?" And from her burned lips, a vague name was uttered, a name that no one at the scene could hear clearly. The medical team immediately took action. Jessica was wrapped in an emergency blanket and taken to the ambulance in critical condition. Those present that day could not forget her wide, pained eyes, as if still trying to convey something important before everything fell silent. The scene was sealed off. Investigators rushed to the scene, but what they found was a charred mess. No signs of a struggle, no obvious weapon, just ashes and utter confusion. The police, trying to reconstruct the scene, also began to notice something unusual. No one had seen Jessica go down that road with anyone. No one knew what had happened in those final minutes. The news spread quickly. People flocked to the cordoned-off area, their eyes filled with fear and horror. Someone in this small community had committed a crime beyond imagination. As Jessica fought for her life in the hospital, the police knew they were dealing with a case where every second of delay could mean the truth would be lost forever in the dark. When the fire died down, all that remained was ashes and unanswered questions. Investigators entered the scene with their flashlights flickering, stepping into a thick layer of smoldering ash. The blue Kia Rio was nothing more than a charred, twisted metal frame, too damaged to be recognized. There were no traces of combustibles around, but the smell of gasoline lingered. Forensic experts determined that someone had intentionally used gasoline to burn the car and the victim inside, an act of deliberate cruelty. The flames spread in a way that made investigators shudder. This was no accident. At the same time, an autopsy was performed on Jessica Chambers. Her body was burned beyond recognition, but the results showed that she had been alive when the fire broke out. Traces in her trachea and lungs confirmed that she had inhaled smoke and soot, and that she had suffered every painful moment before her death. There were no signs of prior assault or strangulation, supporting the theory that Jessica had been burned alive, rather than murdered and burned. Still, the clues were too few to pinpoint the killer. The investigation was forced to delve deeper into the invisible traces, where the truth might be hidden in the silence of the fire. Soon after the first forensic results were released, the investigation into the murder of Jessica Chambers officially entered a critical phase. The crime was so brutal, the scene was almost completely destroyed by fire, making all clues as fragile as threads. The police knew that if they wanted to find the truth, they could not rely on physical traces alone. They needed to dig deeper into the person, the relationships, and the secrets the victim may have taken to the grave. They started with the last people to see Jessica alive. The gas station camera footage was the first clue. Data from the girl's phone became the next focus. Technicians quickly discovered a series of calls and text messages exchanged between Jessica and a man named Quentin Tellis in the hours before the murder. Quentin Tellis, 26, was a familiar face in the small community of Cortland. He had a minor, unremarkable criminal record, but no one thought Tellis could be involved in such a brutal crime. But the numbers didn't lie. The phone tracking showed the two were in close proximity around the same time frame. Detectives approached Tellis cautiously. He appeared calm, saying he had seen Jessica that day, but denied any involvement in the fire. Quentin said they went their separate ways after the meeting, and he went home. But that composure began to falter as investigators compared his testimony with phone data, GPS tracking, and surveillance cameras. A crucial detail emerged. Tellis's phone had traveled a path that closely matched Jessica's final journey. Not only that, around the time the car caught fire, both phones went silent for a short period of time, then came back online at different locations. Investigators knew something was wrong. During the hours-long interrogation, Quentin began to change his story several times. Initially, he denied seeing Jessica that day. When confronted with digital evidence, he admitted to seeing her, but claimed he had left before anything happened. It was this change that led police to dig deeper into Tellis's past. They discovered that Quentin Tellis had been involved in a number of shady cases in Louisiana, including another suspicious death. While the old charges were not directly related to Jessica's case, They helped investigators build a picture of a suspect with an unstable, unpredictable mentality. Meanwhile, a major issue that made the investigation complicated was Jessica's final words. Several rescue workers claimed that she tried to say the attacker's name, but no one heard her clearly. Some said she said Eric or Derek, names that had nothing to do with Quentin Tellis.
Well, we got her name finally, and we then, when we asked, who did this, it took multiple attempts, but I did hear Eric did this to me. Eric set me on fire. That's what I heard.
This ambiguity created a huge hole in the case. The police, despite repeated setbacks, persisted in expanding the investigation. They searched Quentin Tellis's home, looking for DNA, clothing, and any traces of combustible material. But all they found were fragments, not enough to form a solid, incriminating evidence. Tellis later left Mississippi, but investigators continued to follow his every move, never giving up hope of finding the truth. Finally, after nearly 2 years, in 2016, Tellis was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder in the death of Jessica Chambers. Prosecutors believe he burned the young woman alive to cover up another crime or because of a sudden conflict that erupted into violence. But even after the suspect was indicted, those who investigated the case still had a nagging question. Did they find the right culprit, or were they just victims of a series of cruel coincidences? The investigation is closed, but the path to justice remains unclear, because there are stories where even the truth is not enough to ease the pain. 2 years after the tragic death of Jessica Chambers, the courtroom in Panola County, Mississippi, was packed. Everyone was eager to see the truth revealed, to see justice for the young woman whose life had been brutally taken. In the defendant's seat, Quentin Tellis sat quietly, his face calm but his eyes occasionally wavering, hard to hide. The first trial of 2017 opened amid national media attention. Prosecutors painted a clear picture of the crime. Tellis and Jessica met that fateful afternoon. Then for some reason, perhaps a quarrel, a sexual assault, or an attempt to cover up his bad behavior, Tellis set fire to the young woman, burning her alive in his own car. The prosecution presented phone records, GPS location, and call history, all of which pointed to Tellis. They highlighted the inconsistencies in his testimony, initially denying seeing Jessica that day, then admitting it but denying involvement in the death. The defense, on the other hand, focused on the fatal flaws of the case: no DNA, no eyewitnesses, and most of all, Jessica's dying words didn't seem to mention Tellis but something else entirely. The defense argued that you can't convict a person based on circumstantial evidence and assumptions. The jury sat silently, listening to every witness, every recording, every tear from the victim's family. But when the final bell rang, they couldn't reach a consensus. The result: hung jury, no final verdict. A year later, in 2018, the case went to trial for the second time. The old hopes, worries, and pains came flooding back. The prosecutor presented the case again, this time with more intensity, more care. But the defense was no less tenacious. They pointed out that everything was circumstantial and emphasized that in American law, reasonable doubt is enough to acquit. For the second time, the jury repeated the same answer. Absolute consensus is impossible. Sighs of frustration filled the courtroom. Jessica's family burst into tears. As for Quentin Tellis, he left the courtroom with a blank stare. The trial ended without anyone being able to truly say anything. Justice still hung in the air. The pain was still there, but the answer was forever obscured by the flames of that fateful night. Cortland, Mississippi, a small, once peaceful place, has yet to recover from that fateful event. The fire has long since died out. The ashes have cooled, but the pain and unanswered questions still burn in the minds of the locals, in the hearts of those who witnessed this heartbreaking story. Jessica Chambers' death was not only a tragedy for a young girl, but also a painful reminder of the fragility of life, of the cruelty that people can inflict on each other. To this day, while the perpetrator has never been convicted, the case remains a symbol of the undeniable flaws of the justice system, where sometimes the truth is not enough to overcome skepticism and pain cannot be transformed into justice. Jessica's family continues to live in a constant state of conflict between the beautiful memories of a smiling little girl and the bitter reality of a verdict that was never passed. The case raises the painful question: is justice really fair when those who commit crimes can still walk free? What can society do to protect innocent lives from similar tragedies? What do you think? If you were on the jury, would you have enough faith to render a final verdict?